Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
Hi, Bird.
Who won your debate over Darwin?
It was a fruitful exchange of views. So, yeah, I had the guy whose piece in Science, the most esteemed science journal in America, his piece on the descent of man had occasioned my newsletter essay criticizing his piece on the descent of man, or a part of it. He was on my podcast. His name is Agustin Fuentes, no relation to Tito Fuentes, former second baseman for the San Francisco Giants. I was disappointed to learn. But he was on my podcast. We had an actual fruitful exchange. He did say, I said, here was my moment of triumph. I said, I wouldn't have been so critical if you had said, rather than saying Darwin offered justification for genocide, had said he provided justification for genocide, because it's true that some people took what he wrote as justification, but he didn't clearly mean it that way, and it doesn't logically serve that purpose. And he said, well, maybe if I had it to do all over again, I'd say provided and not offered. So this is what debate does for us. It's the Hegelian synthesis.
And his whole thing was sort of to semi-cancel Darwin. So if you use your word, he wouldn't be cancelable at all, right? So,
it's also true. Look, he definitely, Darwin said plenty of things that today we would call racist or sexist or whatever. And so it becomes a question, do you judge somebody in the context of their times? Because everybody else was talking that way. But the only thing I took issue with in the piece was his claim, and he kind of meant it this way when he wrote it, I think, that Darwin, explicitly justified genocide and imperialism.
And what was his moment of triumph?
Well, there were, since I wrote the piece, we wound up not talking about this as much as I had planned. In fact, like almost not at all, but I alluded to it. A letter came to light that Darwin had written 10 years after he wrote Descent, in the final year of Darwin's life, that you could take to argue that at that point he was, there's an argument a lawyer for Darwin could mount in his defense and say, no, he's not here embracing or justifying the, extermination of what he's calling the lower races, which was sadly common terminology in those days. You could make the case, and it would be easier to figure out exactly what he meant if we had the letter that he was replying to. And I think somebody does, but it hasn't been published yet. Anyway, that's something that was brought to my attention, and I think I'm not sure he was aware of that letter after my piece was published, as a result of the piece being published on Twitter. But I like him. I'm going to have coffee with him in a few weeks.
Because you're starting to look like him. That's why.
That's the thing. I'm thinking we're going to turn some heads at the coffee place. It's like, two cool guys, one kind of old and one super old.
Well, Bob, it sounds like your conversation was hauntingly inconclusive.
That's such a tribalistic way to look at this. Must someone win? Must there always be a winner, Mickey?
I'm quoting. That's what the Pulitzer committee said about the classical music victor.
Oh, I saw that phrase. It was hauntingly.
There was a bunch of bullshit in there, including centers, queer persons of color, and all sorts of jargon. But this wasn't jargon. This is an original and absurd phrase, hauntingly inconclusive. I hope to be hauntingly inconclusive instead of just inconclusive.
Maybe we can get there within the next hour. But so what did you have a chance to look at the?
Yeah, I wasn't deeply resentful of anything except the
shortage of white males.
Except that, an LA Times guy won it for reporting on criminal justice, and I can't believe I'll agree with him. But BuzzFeed won, which was,
that hurts.
Because that hurts a lot. But it was reporting about the Chinese campaign against the Uyghurs, Bob. They're doing horrible things to the Uyghurs. And
they are. That's true.
That seems to merit it. So if they can prove it, that's great. There were two other articles about the Uyghurs that came out. One was in Reuters, that purported to find genocide in the decline of their birth rate. And it was just a horribly written article. I couldn't make heads or tails of it. Were they saying that the Chinese had a uniform policy of the number of children and they just enforced it more vigorously against the Uyghurs, or that there was an actual different policy for the Uyghurs? It got all confused. And
well, I think the numbers
didn't explain the academic study. The birth rate's fallen by 50%, but they're trying to explain why it happened.
Well, one reason is they used to be exempt from the birth limit applied to Han Chinese, and they no longer are. Right. But I think that article also said that the birth limit, which is now the same for rural ethnic minorities and Han Chinese, is being more assertively enforced among rural minorities. I mean, there's always, in a sense, been a bias in favor of upper class people, because I think fines are one of the main things they used, right. And a given fine is a lot easier for an affluent person to pay. But they did, I think. I think they said Uyghur women were faced with possible internment if they didn't comply. And the guy I talked to had kind of said that's one way it's coercive, is that they would worry about that becoming more likely. He didn't make it sound like it was explicit, like get sterilized or go to jail, but it was more like they would worry that this would go down on their kind of social credit card as like another reason to lock them up.
Was that in the Reuters report or in the second report, which is an amnesty report, where they interviewed like 40 or 50 people?
I haven't read the amnesty report. Now, that says that some of them are reporting torture.
Right. And they interviewed people who were not in the country at the time. So I don't know if that makes it more credible or less credible. But you don't have some beef with the amnesty report?
No, I mean, I haven't read the report, so I can't. I mean, in general, obviously their human rights are being violated. I think it's important to try to get clear on exactly what's being done and how much of it. And it is true that once you get, I always try to be careful, because once you get a situation where there are kind of big and influential factions that are, in effect, trying to increase tensions between two countries, you have to be careful, because they will take anybody who looks like, it's like Jeffrey Goldberg, people helpfully bringing to Jeffrey Goldberg's attention these people, these Kurds or whatever they were, who are claiming that they know of an Al-Qaeda connection. You just, the more there are vested interests in fomenting tensions between two countries, I think the more careful you have to. But I haven't even looked at the amnesty report, and maybe overwhelming evidence, or maybe so many people or whatever. I don't know.
I was hoping you must not have been listening to Steve Bannon, because you would have, I think, more intense opinions if you had.
Well, I know what his opinion would be. I mean,
right, but it sort of reinforces it.
What do you mean? I mean, he would definitely accept all the evidence we're describing.
Yeah, you would react against it by saying that the evidence is all crap.
Well, no, I wouldn't say the evidence is all crap.
Right.
I haven't even looked at some of it. But there are definitely major misconceptions. Yeah. There are people who think that the Chinese government has a policy of prohibiting Uyghur women from having children or something, and they're enforcing it. That's just not true.
Well, there was one witness who said she was forced to undergo sterilization at age 50.
The guy I interviewed said that. He said it's kind of odd. I mean, he said a number of women are being forced to have sterilized when they're almost, you would think they're too old to have children. I don't understand that.
Yes. What's missing from all these accounts, and I don't know if it's one of your kinds of empathy or not, is I don't understand why the Chinese are doing this. There must be some rationale other than that they're Uyghurs and we hate them, why they're doing it. Are they Uyghurs subversive? Are they allied with are they irredentists? Is there another Muslim country next door that they're worried about? What are they worried about?
There was actually a good podcast episode on this NPR podcast called, I think, Throughline, which was very sympathetic to the Uyghurs. And it underscored something I hadn't entirely understood, which is, I mean, I knew there were concerns about Uyghur separatism, and there is a nationalist separatist movement there. And I knew they were worried about Islamist terrorism, kind of what they would call jihadist terrorism or something, because there have been some, I guess, Uyghurs who went and joined ISIS or something. Although, because of the shortage of highly lethal weapons among the Chinese citizenry, the gravest terrorist attack was a mass knife attack that killed a few dozen people a number of years ago. They haven't had huge casualty incidents. But what I came to appreciate from this podcast is that there were two separate escalations of Chinese concern about the Uyghurs. And the first came when the Soviet Union was falling apart and its republics were like seceding, leaving the Union, some of them Muslim, some of them Turkic, like the Uyghurs. And then the second was after 9/11, when they, to some extent, cynically exploited the U.S. rhetoric about the global war on terror. They're like, yeah, that's what we're doing.
What's the real reason? They think the Uyghurs are inferior. They think the Uyghurs are dirty. They think. The Chinese, so they're bad, or what?
My assumption is that there are genuine concerns about secessionism and separatism, and the Chinese are like, they just seem. Well, I mean, you could say a lot of countries are maybe, but they seem, they have a very clear conception of the legitimate compass of Chinese territory, and they think it includes some things that we don't, like Taiwan, but it's very important to them, and they don't want to lose any of it. I mean, again, what nations do welcome secession, but I guess. In a way, I would say, how much more of an overreaction is what they're doing than what we did to 9/11? Now, it assumed a different form. Our repression of domestic Muslims was not of this magnitude. On the other hand, we went and invaded a country for no reason whatsoever. Countries freak out for reasons that are unfortunate, but not uncommon. I mean, it's like the world is full of countries that are exaggerating the threats they face. And I'm sure that China is exaggerating the secessionist threat.
What the country you're talking about is Afghanistan?
Well, no, I was talking about Iraq.
Because isn't it clear that Bush was planning to topple Saddam before 9/11? So that was 9/11 was just an excuse.
I don't know about that, but apparently it's true that pretty much immediately after 9/11, there were plans being floated to invade Iraq. And this comes through in the Slate podcast, which I will get around to criticizing. But first, what did I want to ask? First, let's get the cicada sex out of the way. Now, I assume these cicadas are having sex. Have you seen these weird?
No.
It's really freaky.
I'm on tenterhooks.
I mean, let me get the side profile. It's a little more. But
I'm excited.
Now, I Googled it and haven't totally confirmed it, but I've seen a few of these things, and it's like, I don't know why you would do it this way, but then again, I'm not a cicada. You see what's going on there?
They got a sort of a push me, pull you going.
Yeah, it's back to back. It's like...
Well, that sort of makes certain amount of sense.
Isn't that a great picture?
They...
Don't I take great cicada sex pictures?
That's a good sex picture, yes.
Thank you.
It's sort of a...
No, they stay there. I don't know what the hell else they'd be doing. And I've seen this repeatedly. I've seen pictures of it.
Maybe they're saying, I didn't ask for the anal probe.
That would be a great grand unifying theory. If one of these cicadas is an alien cicada administering an anal probe.
But that sort of makes sense. Otherwise, the wings would get in the way, right? Their legs. Anyway,
I'm pretty sure there are insects who manage to do it doggy style. But we're exceeding my level of.
There's a topic
expertise.
for next week.
I'm writing it down. I'm writing it down.
That'll bring him back.
Now, what was your takeaway from the Epstein?
Well, the New York, the Vanity Fair had a big piece on Epstein by Gabriel Sherman, an untrustworthy reporter who never gets his man.
Is he?
A little untrustworthy, but mainly he never gets his man. He wrote a 600-page book on Roger Ailes that did not nail Roger Ailes on the sex count.
How could you not? I mean, I've read pieces about Roger Ailes that nailed him.
After the book came out, somebody else nailed Roger Ailes. Gabriel Sherman produced this huge tome that completely missed the story. So he produces this long, so-called deep dive, unquote. Actually, it wasn't that deep. It was fine. On Leslie Wexner, the limited guy, and Epstein, and claims that Wexner gave Epstein his initial fortune to the tune of $400 million. Doesn't quite document. Says that there were.
Well, go ahead. Sorry.
The prize would be if he could prove that Epstein and Wexner had an affair, and that Epstein was gay, and there was a sexual attraction.
That's sheer hearsay, right?
And it's hearsay, but it's prevalent hearsay, and he alludes to it. He fills the piece with innuendos from people, and it has Wexner being asked it directly by a reporter and saying no and denying it.
Well, I've seen the video of Wexner deny. I've seen Epstein deny it during his deposition.
Oh, really? Anyway, he says whatever their relationship is, he made Epstein a lot of money. Well, you sort of want to know what the relationship is, and
there is an answer. There is an answer in the piece.
The answer is Israel, yes.
But no, that's not. There's an interesting segment on that.
He doesn't go into Israel. He spends a lot of time laying the groundwork for a sex charge that never comes, and never really goes into Israel, which is the obvious alternative explanation that's crying out for somebody to analyze. And I don't think he did it.
Well, I maintain, first of all, that he is answering. He does have an answer to the question of what was the source of the bond, what was the source of Wexner's attraction to Epstein. And I'll get to that. But as for Israel, there is this interesting paragraph that's kind of funny. I mean, so he says, during the 1990s, both Epstein's and Wexner's profiles grew on the world stage. In 1991, Wexner co-founded a philanthropic organization of Jewish billionaires known as the Mega Group, which uses some of its vast resources to shape Middle East policy. Here's what I think is funny. In 2003, Wexner's foundation commissioned GOP messaging guru Frank Luntz to advise American Jewish leaders on how to rally support for Israel. And then here is a quote from Luntz's recommendation. I guess it's from a memo or something. Quote, for a solid year, you should be invoking the name of Saddam Hussein and how Israel was always behind American efforts to rid the world of this ruthless dictator and liberate their people. So I guess this was before the invasion had gone south. If it was after the invasion had gone south, it would have been an anti-Semitic trope, right, to say that Israel got you into this war. But it seems to me like kind of dubious advice in any event, right?
Right.
That's weird.
Right.
I mean, Frank Luntz is weird. But
I know some people who claim he gave them good advice. So he can't be a total fraud. But in some cases, he's clearly, completely wrong. Like, he had this focus group that proclaimed Trump the loser of the big Megyn Kelly debate. Well, that doesn't seem to have happened. And this advice did seem like strange advice.
But Sherman's answer to the question of what doesn't. Yeah. No, that doesn't answer it. Here is his answer, which I thought I had never. Maybe it wasn't new, but I had never quite latched onto it. Is that Wexner was this socially inept, perhaps somewhat introverted guy, and Epstein was the key to drawing him into a rich, high-powered social life. That's what Epstein did for him. That's the answer the piece gives.
I guess that seems slightly plausible. Epstein did not introduce him to his wife. Somebody else did, but he sort of latched onto that in a.
But look,
helpful
Epstein's
way.
obviously well equipped to introduce him to what Epstein did was cultivate powerful people in certain realms. He's just ideally suited. Now, I don't know how far along he had gotten when he got.
He was an egregious name dropper who alienated a whole lot of people with his egregious name dropping. And maybe if you're a mere billionaire from Columbus, you're susceptible to glad handing by a sophisticated Manhattan.
Well, that's the thing.
Dropper.
But Epstein's predecessor was some guy who had been to Ohio State Business School, and he's one of the key sources of this for this piece, and is very bitter about being displaced by Epstein. But I think you're right. I mean, Wexner was like a local guy, and Epstein was maybe a gateway to coastal elites or something. On the other hand, I mean, it's my impression that one thing Epstein did is use the money he got from Wexner to build this network, right? I mean, it's not like when he met Wexner, he was nearly as plugged in as he became, right?
I think that's right. And he was living in a one-bedroom apartment, according to Gabriel Sherman. I guess if Bill Gates falls for Epstein's con, Wexner could fall for Epstein's con, but it doesn't quite add up, you know?
Look, is it a con? I mean, the guy hooks you up with a lot of women you want to have sex with. I mean, if you don't wind up getting...
That's the missing element. That element is not there. He's not introducing Wexner to a lot of women, which reinforces the alternative explanation, which is the simplest, satisfies Occam's razor, which is Epstein and Wexner Wexner was attracted to Epstein, not attracted to women who Epstein introduced him to.
Or it reinforces your thesis that Gabriel Sherman always misses the story.
Well, he doesn't get the story. There was innuendo about Ailes in his book. He just didn't get the story. And people I know at Fox sort of said he's not trustworthy. And he wrote a whole series of pieces about Trump for Vanity Fair that all depended on an ex-administration official, an unnamed source, and they were just serving Vanity Fair readers up what they wanted to hear. It didn't really move the ball. It was like, why are they paying this guy money again to do this? This was a much better piece. There are a lot of good tidbits in this piece. It's they say that the worst thing an editor can tell you is there's a lot of good stuff in here. Well, there's a lot of good stuff in here. It's just not all tied together convincingly. There's Ghislaine Maxwell emerging from a meeting with Epstein saying, I have to bring the nubiles.
I had heard that before. Most of this had been, I had heard.
But I want to see somebody do the Israel thing. It cries out for an actual reporting analysis of what was going on. I no longer think that he's a creature of the Mossad. I think maybe he's a creature of a bunch of supporters of Israel who decided to do something for Israel.
I think that's what this mega group was, right?
I don't know.
Wexner co-founded
about it.
Yeah, this was the first time I talked to a kind of conspiracy-minded guy I know about Epstein, and this was a long time ago. This name is the first time I heard about the mega group.
Yeah, but you don't know if it might just be, Jews telling stories about their mother's gefilte fish. I mean, you just don't know.
It could be.
So that's what I want to find out is what is this network? Is there a network? It is. An important fact for this is, supposedly George Mitchell is compromised and Richardson is compromised.
Bill Richardson.
That's like dog bites man. So you can that's not a surprise.
Well, wait, Richardson's dog bites man. Mitchell is man bites dog, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And so was Mitchell slated to be Mideast envoy at the time he was compromised, or were they investing him for the future? Or maybe it wasn't true at all. But Sherman's piece implied that he was already the Mideast envoy, and I don't think that's true. I think he was the Irish envoy at the time. But anyway.
Yeah, I guess I forgot. So yeah. Okay, go ahead.
I want somebody to pay attention to the Israel angle as well as the sex angle. That was my takeaway.
I didn't know that you're going to get a lot more news on that. I mean, there's Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine's father, and
Oh, there's a lot more news. You could get their fucking emails. You could get the minutes of the mega meeting. You could, have some source at the CIA tell you what the hell was going on. There's a lot.
You should do seriously, not seriously, but what would be interesting? Just turn your newsletter into the Epstein newsletter.
It already.
I guarantee you a growing following.
There are podcasts. There are Epstein podcasts.
Are there?
Yeah.
I think I'm going to add them to my. No, I don't want to go down that. The UFO rabbit hole has eaten up more time than I'm really happy about.
Did a podcast win the Pulitzer? I think there was a podcast.
Well, there is now an audio reporting category. I was disappointed to see that we weren't even finalists.
No, really?
Mickey. Yeah, it's fucking. I don't know. What do these people do with their time? These quote judges.
It's all fixed. It's fixed.
Wait, biography, history, fiction, special audio reporting. Lisa Hay report and Robert Little, 4 people from National Public Radio. Oh, real dark horse. The podcast No Compromise examined a group of American right-wing activists with extreme pro-gun views and a growing following on social media. So you may have been mentioned in the podcast, Mickey, but apparently you did not win the award.
I'm holding out for that. So they're the sort of people who fly large American flags of the sort that offended New York Times editorial page member Mara Gay. And I thought there are a couple of, she got into trouble for saying she went to Long Island. She saw some horrible people with pro-Trump signs and anti-Biden signs with large American flags. And the large American flags were in themselves disturbing because they told her that, America is for white people, not people like you, basically, which is a strange interpretation of an American flag. And
your thought was, well, maybe if you flew an American flag, that's not the message they'd send. Is that what you thought?
No, well, she's obviously right in sociological terms. As some commenters point out, if people fly big-ass American flags, it's 99.9% chance that they are right-wingers. But, it's weird because one of the most moving experiences I've had, and maybe that shows the poverty of my life. Last July 4th, not this current season, but last July 4th, I went to the supermarket and they were like, there was a little display of sort of forlorn tiny American flags for sale, and I thought the country was desperately in need of some unifying sign of patriotism. I mean, there was the Trump versus the un-Trump. There was COVID. The whole country was just in deep trouble, being pulled apart, and you needed some sign of unity.
So
I bought one of these flags, which were totally ignored, and like they weren't selling any. And the guy who was bagging the groceries was deeply grateful that I'd bought it, and I thought that was like a nice. It was nice of him, and it showed that there are some people who. So you have one.
You still have one friend in California.
Well, but the point was it was a small flag. So at some point, as the flag gets smaller and smaller, it stops being an obnoxious display of right-wing extremism and becomes an actual unifying sign of patriotism. And what size is that? I think about the size of a television, probably.
I'm not sure that's the way they're read. I mean, sadly, I think the American flag has come to be seen as basically a conservative signal. This started.
Bruce Springsteen could fly an American flag. I mean, he doesn't, but
yeah, and for a while until Joe Rogan moved to Austin, he had one on his set. I don't know exactly what that meant, but what was I going to say? Oh, I mean, I first started noticing this like when I was 12 in the late 60s, when you would see in response to like the counterculture and the hippies, people started putting American flag decals on their windows, and some of them would say America, love it or leave it. Some of them didn't say that, but that was kind of the mess. That became the thing. And then people started, in fact, I have a sweatshirt with a peace sign that has, that has elements of the American flag in it. It's like if you superimposed a peace flag like stencil on an American flag. It's what you'd see. I mean, a peace sign, a symbol on a flag. Anyway, so this goes way back. I mean,
but she's clearly wrong to say it's a symbol of racism. It may be a symbol of right-wingness and anti-hippiedom. I don't, some of those guys are going to be black guys driving big pickup trucks with huge flags who are Trumpists. I mean, it's not like Mara Gay, we don't like your kind around here. I don't think, unless you're deep in the New York Times rabbit hole with Tom Etzel.
No, but I mean, the percentage of people who have some animosity toward blacks is probably going to be a little higher among people who are.
Well, sure, but that's true. I mean, I can tell by the car you drive whether the percentage of.
I don't think. Well, look, I certainly think most people who fly an American flag do not think that they are flying a symbol of racism.
It doesn't mean I go on Morning Joe and denounce Oldsmobiles because they have a higher percentage of racists. I mean, give me a break. Okay. I thought it was weird that the New York Times officially defended her, which implied that they thought there was some vulnerability there. They don't.
Did they officially defend her?
They don't officially defend everybody who gets in trouble.
I don't recall them officially defending James Bennett. No.
Did they? Yeah. Anyway, they. So there's that. That's all I have to say about her. But I got to tell my moving flag anecdote.
Yeah, you couldn't tell, but I was getting a little misty-eyed. By the way, Joe Rogan says he cries a lot. I was just listening to this podcast he did with this Harvard professor woman or researcher woman or something who wrote a book about testosterone.
Don't shift to Joe Rogan. Everybody listens to Joe Rogan. Nobody listens to Steve Bannon. You are a lifeline to Steve Bannon.
Actually, not as many people, I think, listen to Rogan as they used to. I think Spotify may have cut down on his audience a little to move to Spotify.
Why would you give a guy millions of dollars and then fuck him over like that? I don't understand it.
Fuck him over in the sense of forcing him to remove some of his content, you mean?
Yes, and it cut down his audience, as you say.
Well, that's not. I think what cuts down his audience is he's no longer available on YouTube. He's no longer. That was part of the deal. I mean, they moved him behind a paywall.
Okay.
You have to subscribe to Spotify to get him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we want to linger at the bottom of the pyramid of Gravitas, we have Hunter.
Yeah, bring it on. I didn't even know what's the new Hunter story?
Hunter was one of the emails.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. My N-word.
Right.
Now, was the guy he was texting black?
Yes. And
yeah, go ahead.
And he used the N-word ending in A, which I think is slightly different than the N-word ending in ER.
So he wrote my Nigga, presumably,
correct.
Although it's
Can you be canceled even for spelling it out?
Not in the Parrot room.
I know, but I would be careful. Remember McNeil. Remember Donald McNeil. You don't want me to have to cancel you, then I do this all by myself.
We should have him in the Parrot room. By the way, we may have a guest next week, folks. This is a bold experiment in the Parrot room. We'll see.
It's a bold experiment, and it's not just an attempt to fill time. It's
it grows organically out of our boldness.
Yes. There you go. So it'll be good. But I also claim not only is he talking to a black friend of his or his lawyer, so but
first of all, he's got a black lawyer,
right? But
that's good.
Then I claim that the conversation is actually a bit witty. It's
he thinks he's on sufficiently good terms with the guy, and he may be right that he makes this. He's kind of jokingly referring to, and I think doesn't the guy reply affirmatively?
Let me read it. I'll read it.
Sorry.
Where do you find? He says, "Where do you find unconditional love, then, George? Where do you?" And George, who's the other guy, says, "God loves unconditionally. Bo loves unconditionally. Children are too young to understand what it means, but you will show them. There are ideals of unconditional love that serve as proxies. I don't have many. You, God," and I mean, the guy's sucking up to him in a big way. "Oh my God, did you just use a fictional character? Blah, blah, blah. And my dead brother's unconditional love is what I should rely on. And my kids aren't that old. Aren't children, George."
I'm not understanding this. Does it make sense?
Well, I don't know who the fictional character was, unless it's God, but he says, "Why are you invoking my dead brother as a case of unconditional love? He's dead." And that his children aren't as young as they're certainly old enough to understand what unconditional love means. And the guy says, "My parents' love was conditioned." And Hunter replies, "My penis as of late has been unconditional." And the other guy said, "That's why we are searching."
Wait. What did that mean? My penis has been unconditional.
I don't know. He has his penis on his mind.
I think these guys knew each other pretty well.
He says, "My penis as of late has been unconditional." And the other guy said, "That's why we are searching." And Hunter says, "For my penis?" And the other guy says, "And we will always be searching." And Hunter says, "It's a big penis, George. They always find it. And I only love you because you're black." And the other guy says, "It's so annoying when you interject with frivolity." And the other guy says, "True dat." And then he uses the N word with an A. "But I'm done my rant." So I claim you laughed a little bit.
There's a second N-word reference, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. But you laugh there, so it's like not completely.
What part did I laugh at?
It's a big penis, George. They always find it.
That is side-splittingly funny. But
it's not bad. It's like Prince Charles talking to his.
One thing to remember about texts is that there can be a lag such that the thing that your quote reply appears after is not what it was a reply to.
Yeah, I think that's what was going on here.
Yeah,
but it's still funny.
Yeah.
Found out kind of ways.
Yeah, I'll try to repurpose that line. What is it again? I'll try it on my wife tonight. What is it?
It's a big penis. They always find it.
It's a big penis. They always find it. Honey, I'll try it now.
Honey, have you seen my penis? There you go. There is a double standard because if a Republican was caught using the N-word, even ending in A, he would get grief for it, and Hunter is they're letting Hunter slide as usual. The biggest case of press bias in the last campaign was
I don't think
conspiracy to
look.
Let me finish the sentence to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story.
In no universe should this be cancelable. Give me a break. Two consenting adults. The black guy seems to be game and think it's funny. Although you could argue that since Hunter is paying him to be his lawyer, there's the power disparity.
Exactly. It's abuse. It's harassment. But all I'm saying is that if a Trumpist had been caught doing the same thing, they would get a lot more grief than Hunter is getting. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know.
And the jury is out on the N-word ending in A, I think. Isn't it? It's hauntingly inconclusive. We don't know if that's cancelable.
Oh, I think you should be careful with it.
That's inconclusive, Bob.
If you're a white guy.
But if the N-word not ending in A is a slam dunk cancel.
I will say, I was trying to figure out how far back does the N-word kind of ban the anti-N-word norm go. And I did see a Dick Cavett show where he used the word he quoted it back to, who was this British guy from the 1970s who was a forerunner of, well, kind of a Brexit, but of ethnic nationalism in Britain. He's pretty famous in your circles.
Powell?
What?
Enoch Powell?
Yeah, I believe so. Very, upper class kind of.
I don't know.
Anyway, and
he gave
Dick Cavett just
Rivers
repeats,
of Blood speech.
Yeah, I think that he's the guy, and I think maybe he was quoting Dick Cavett was quoting the speech, and he just used the word the guy had used.
I haven't read the speech. Everybody says it's very prescient and also filled with racism. So
some evidence of that.
Bill Maher used the N-word and survived recently.
Well, that's his shtick. What a troll. What a worthless troll that guy is.
I don't think he's a worthless troll.
I know. I was trolling you. I was waiting to get that out of you.
He can be very funny in an actual useful way.
He is a troll.
I mean, he tries to get attention. Of course, he's on cable.
Well, but there are ways to get attention without being a troll. Oprah got attention.
It's hard.
Oprah got attention.
Wasn't Oprah a huge troll?
Was she?
I don't know. She never said anything offensive, but she had people on who were, I don't know. There was Alex Hurd, I think, used to have a Hathos, he hate watching contest over Oprah and Jerry Springer, and which was producing the most effective offensive content. And I think Oprah won in the end.
Are you serious? Jerry Springer, there's a true.
Well, I never actually watched Oprah, so who knows what she was doing all day.
Oh, God, these are totally different genres. Why are we even comparing them? I mean, that was his joke. That was Alex Hurd. That was his joke.
No, it wasn't.
Because Jerry Springer was aggressively offensive.
Alex was serious. We can have Alex on as a guest one of these days.
I mean, Jerry Springer is like the lowest form of life. But the lesson of his political career, he was mayor of Cincinnati, right?
And he
never pay a prostitute with a credit card or a check. Always use cash,
especially across state lines. But at Harper's, we gave him the award for the best political ad of the year.
Yeah,
because I think during the scandal, he produced like a very sober sort of ad about sort of tax policy, making a substantive point, and it was probably to make up for the fact that he'd been caught seeing a hoe. But anyway, it was a great ad. So I don't think he's bottom feeding scum.
On this Joe Rogan podcast, this woman was talking about highly promiscuous women who have a lot of sex partners. And Joe Rogan said, "Oh, super hoes." She burst into laughter, this woman.
Well, that was sort of a trolly comment, but it was funny.
Well, he's a little bit of a troll.
So the Axios is pushing the Axios has gone way like biased to the left in an annoying way. They said the scandal of the summer is Trump's investigation of congressmen over this leak thing where he pulled some records from Apple. And I agree that's a scandal, but that's a scandal of the summer. Shoot me now. It's like,
well, wait, it is. I actually haven't been keeping up with this, but if it is indeed, if it's indeed the case that he, got a hold of the phone records of people in Congress, and I think also people in media, that's kind of concerning, isn't it?
It's a little concerning. He didn't find anything, and it's so
what? I mean, it's
they get a hold of
the thought that counts, as they say.
They get a hold of records all the time. I mean, yes, it's moving the frontier a little, and but it just doesn't excite me that he found, Adam Schiff's phone records. If you're looking for a leaker, that's the sort of evidence you want.
Moving the frontier is a pretty nice way to say creeping authoritarianism. Congratulations on that.
Well, it's creeping invasion of privacy, but there's plenty of stories about that don't involve Trump. I don't know. It seems the scandal. I don't mind saying it's a scandal. It's saying this. We found the scandal of the summer because we found an anti-Trump scandal. I'd much rather talk about
immigration,
about Hunter's penis, or
we agree there,
or or cicadas.
Cicadas having sex, or no. Let's don't go there.
Or Epstein. We can always keep talking about Epstein.
Or UFOs. I have a UFO question.
Okay, and you had a list of topics, so I don't think we've exhausted the list.
We have not exhausted them.
Okay.
Good news for everyone listening.
Yeah, there's more to come.
The UFO thing, I just want to underscore something that I said in the regular podcast. There are, in our galaxy, 20 billion planets, 20 billion that are in the Goldilocks zone, neither too warm nor too cold for life. Almost certainly more like 40, 60, 80 billion, by the way, but 20 is a baseline. And it is pretty weird, right? That we haven't heard from Anybody? I mean, it's true that there are challenges to them communicating with us at great distance, but I don't know.
And this is the so-called Fermi paradox.
Yeah, like given that number of planets, why haven't we heard from them?
Right. And maybe we're just too out of the way to notice. Like we're so unimportant that they're focused on bigger fish.
But you got to think, if once they get a few millennia ahead of us technologically, they could just broadcast shit in all directions. It wouldn't be that hard, or to send out like probes broadcasting shit.
I mean, alien completists will find us. Well, we just want to find every alien life form to complete our collection.
Well, wouldn't we do that if we could? We would try to. But anyway, my question actually is the interest in UFOs partly, I mean, it's true that a new database has emerged for reasons I don't totally understand, by the way, how it came to be that these videos were released and so on, but a new database has emerged. But to some extent, does the interest in this grow out of the same kind of impetus that has generated all this talk about the simulation? Like, is there just some kind of hunger for things to be weirder than they seem? And is that maybe a function of declining religiosity or something?
Could be. Didn't you contributed to the simulation talk because you wrote a piece about a guy who thought the universe was a computer, right?
I did. In 1988, cover story for The Atlantic, and also a part of my book, Three Scientists and Their Gods. I mean, he wasn't, simulation wasn't even used. He was partly saying he thought that the laws of the universe, at the most fundamental levels, the physical laws governing the universe are digital algorithms and not like analog equations.
Right.
But so you could posit that without even talking about anybody having set it up. On the other hand, he did think that the universe was designed for purpose, and he even thought that this could explain miracles or something. Just I guess the hacker inserting shit in the code, or
Is this guy still alive?
He probably is. He would have been around 50 in the mid 80s. Could be. So
his theory accepts quantum physics, because that seems not very digital.
Well, one of the challenges was reconciling it with quantum physics. And Richard Feynman, I had one conversation with Richard Feynman, and he was a good friend of Ed Fredkin's, and he said he didn't.
Ed Fredkin being the guy.
Ed Fredkin was the guy at MIT. Yeah. He was a computer science guy, not a physicist, but he was allowed to teach a course called digital physics there or something. Right. And he had a whole following. And by the way, the guy, what's the physicist who came up with the Mathematica software? Stephen Wolfram is more famous for the digital physics stuff than Ed Fredkin, and he may have even come out with a book on it. But you will find in my 1988 book, Three Scientists and Their Gods, back when Stephen Wolfram was obscure, a reference to him and my reporting that a number of people think he takes more ideas from Ed Fredkin without attributing them to him
anyway, you were about to say what Feynman said. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Feynman was skeptical of the theory, partly, I think, on grounds that it wasn't obvious how you reconcile it with quantum physics. Now, Fredkin asserted that he could do that, and it would be trivially easy to simulate quantum effects digitally. But I said, well, have you done it? And he's like, no, it's too obvious or something. And I thought, well, why don't you go ahead and do it?
That's like my theory that Einstein wasn't too smart. That the smart people were walking around saying, yeah, E equals MC squared. It's obvious. Why does he have to go prove it?
Are you serious that you think Einstein wasn't that smart?
I've talked about this. I ran into a guy who was an anti-Darwinian, friend of a friend.
You could make that argument about Darwin, by the way, but go ahead.
And who said Einstein was not the smartest guy in class. He was just the guy who sat through the problem and solved it. But the smart guys were going around saying, "Oh yeah, that's obvious. Too obvious to answer." I'm just saying what he said. I don't know nothing about bullshit.
I think of Einstein as one of the few people who, like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I should read Walter Isaacson's book on him, but in fact, I should listen to that. Anyway, what I was going to say, yeah,
go ahead. I
think of him as one of the few guys who, if he had not lived, it really would have taken a while for anybody to come up with what he came up with. With Darwin, that was manifestly not the case.
Because he had the guy who was already lined up. He'd already done it.
Exactly. And so too with calculus, independently arrived at by Newton and Leibniz. A lot of things, but in by Einstein's era, things were moving pretty fast in terms of ideas. It was getting harder and harder to have a thought that was way ahead of everyone else's, much more so than in Newton's day. And yet, who was close? You tell me.
I don't know. These guys we've never heard of. You keep in mind you're talking to a guy who was taught physics by Joan Baez's father, and only passed the final exam. We were supposed to derive Bohr's equation, something. So I did the cheat thing where you start with where you're supposed to start at the top, and you start with Bohr's equation at the bottom, and you write equivalent equations. And then when they meet in the middle, you just go home. And hope that he doesn't notice that there's a leap there.
Was this in college?
It was in summer school, my senior year of high school.
You were doing quantum physics?
Was it quantum physics? It was Bohr.
Did you say physics? Bohr, B-O-H-R?
Yeah.
Well, he's most known for quantum physics.
It was some equation of Bohr's. I don't know if it was quantum or not. I didn't understand it. I was too busy listening to the development.
Well, he's the guy I told you that story about, I think already, maybe in the Parrot room. But yeah, where the guy says he's so afraid to admit to Einstein he didn't understand Bohr's lecture. And so he says, "What did you think?" And Einstein says, "I can never understand Bohr."
I told that to a quantum physicist last week.
What was the reaction? Yeah.
He laughed. He thought it was funny.
It's in the book.
I didn't even deliver it well.
It's in a book called The End Papers.
Well, anyway, how did we get started on that?
And by the way, you dismissed the guy who lived in this house before us because he only taught quantum physics to the guy who came up with the many worlds theory. But the guy himself should have won the Nobel Prize if it were just world. So.
He was like the editor at the Washington Post who was the third man on the Watergate story and got cut out?
Well, no. Did that guy get a byline?
I think he was the editor, but he was a very hands-on editor.
No, this guy actually was one of the three people who co-authored the piece, I think, in Nature, saying, "We have found the background radiation from the Big Bang."
Right.
And two of them won the Nobel Prize and he didn't. And it's hilarious because they are the guys who discovered the background radiation, but they had no clue what it was. And somebody said to him, "Well, you should talk to Bob Dickey at Princeton," because he had actually been looking for it. They weren't looking for it.
Right.
They're like, they've got these satellite dishes at Bell Labs and they see this weird noise and they're like, "Is this pigeon shit? What is this?" And like Dickey explains to him, it's the fucking cosmic background radiation, because he's been actually looking for it. Right. And by the way, one of these two guys didn't even believe in the Big Bang. He was a so-called steady stater. He didn't yet believe that the universe was even expanding. And he got a Nobel Prize. Do I sound bitter?
You sound bitter for this guy.
I am bitter. My house could be famous.
You're channeling the ghost of this guy.
My house could have a plaque on the front.
But this is so what it's Dickey's mistake. He should have said, "I don't know what this noise is, nothing to see here," and then published it under his own solo byline and won the Nobel Prize.
Yeah, he should have said, "Looks like pigeon shit to me." And totally.
That's like when this is a lesson that I learned is with the Arnold Schwarzenegger sex scandal, somebody said there's this issue of We magazine that
you mean OUI?
OUI that has
Mickey.
Arnold Schwarzenegger talking about a rape, and so I printed that. And no, what you do is you have to go get the damn magazine, and you don't want to steer other reporters to the magazine. You have to go get the magazine yourself, and then you get all the credit.
We was a nudie magazine.
So I fucked that up. Were there nudes in it? I don't think so. Were there?
Oh, totally. Were you not a young man in the when was
OUI?
This? OUI.
They were tasteful French nudes, probably.
Well, they were about Playboy level. I remember a guy said, I remember there was a guy named Richard King in my high school in San Antonio said, "Ooh, have you seen OUI magazine?"
Okay.
I said,
well,
look, even I know how to pronounce this word, dude.
Try croissant. I'm embarrassing myself in bakeries around the country by saying croissant. I think people think I'm a twit.
You are
anyway, in an issue of We magazine, Schwarzenegger talked about a gang rape, but yes, your guy just played it wrong. Your guy just played it wrong. He has only himself to blame. He was actually concerned. He actually cared about the dispersion of knowledge instead of getting credit.
Do you think it's somehow natural that I wound up living in this house, Mickey?
Because you're similarly aggrieved, I believe.
Oh, I have many such grievances.
Yeah, right.
I should have won. It's hard to name a prize I shouldn't have won. Really disappointed to read the Pulitzers today.
Well, especially the podcast one, but there's always next year.
I thought we had a shot.
So
maybe you should crank up the wokeness a little between now and next year.
What does it mean to be a finalist? That's a good thing, right? It's better than
I was a finalist.
Nothing.
Did you know I was a finalist?
For the Pulitzer?
Totally.
For what?
This is why I'm so bitter about Leon Wieseltier and other things.
For the moral
The Evolution
animal?
of God, for general nonfiction. And he assigned the hit job review of that book, which had been published, to Jerry Coyne.
To coincide with the Pulitzer jury meeting, probably.
It wouldn't surprise me, but it had come out. But anyway, what's funny is, this guy, Augustine Fuentes, who I critiqued. Right. We have bonded over our common loathing of Jerry Coyne because Jerry Coyne egregiously misrepresented my book in the New Republic Review. And if anybody doubts it, I encourage you to Google my reply in the New Republic to his review. And he egregiously misrepresented what this guy wrote in Science. I mean, Jerry Coyne, there really is, how can I say this politely? Something wrong with his brain. I mean, he just can't characterize stuff accularely. But aside from that, he's a wonderful scientist.
And he's going to be our guest next week on the Parrot Room.
Jerry,
so that should be fireworks.
Yeah, coming. Jerry, if we can land Jerry, he's a hard get, as they say. No, he writes this blog, Why Evolution is True.
It's not Jerry, by the way.
He wrote about me.
Disappointed.
He wrote very complimentarily about my piece about Augustine Fuentes, but that does not get him off the hook.
No way. So what else is on your list? I have one more thing at least.
Well, you said you had, you mentioned the grand unified theory of COVID origin already, didn't you?
Right. I mentioned that in the regular podcast.
I was going to trash David Sanger again, which I plan to do. Quickly, while taking my walk in between the regular podcast and this, I was listening to the highly regarded DMZ podcast, and Bill and Matt were having an argument over whether Kamala is teachable. Bill, in terms of this most recent kind of disaster, we went to the border and I haven't been to Europe. Bill says, and he used to do media coaching. He says, this is a case where you have a distinct problem that you can fix. Her problem is she replies to stuff flippantly. And when Bill asked him to come up with an example, he alluded to, kind of vaguely, but alluded to exactly the example I had thought of when I first heard her do this I haven't been to Europe thing either, which was, can you fill in the blank? What is the I haven't been to Europe either, like laughing it off, remind you of that she's done?
I know, but the idea that she cackles and blows it off with frivolity that's become conventional wisdom.
What Bill and I both thought of was, It was a debate. Do you remember? It was a debate.
Oh,
when
yeah.
They were, I guess they were saying like, wait a second, didn't you basically call Joe Biden a racist and now you're endorsing him and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, it was a debate, and laughs as if, is she saying that debates are a joke? And you shouldn't trust anything. What was she saying? And
am I crazy? And am I crazy to think that because she's a black woman, she's used to getting a break from the press and getting away with that kind of shit? And a normal, cisgendered white guy could not get away with that. And so she's basically saying, I'm a black woman, try to make something of it, buddy.
Mickey, you're crazy.
Yeah.
The last part, I think, was going too far. I mean, she may have, look, certainly part of the appeal of her in kind of certain parts of the liberal spectrum, at the risk of offending any wine moms out there, perhaps the wine mom constituency. Do you know that term, right?
She seems like a slightly tipsy woman talking with her girlfriends.
No, I don't mean Kamala does. There is a wine mom may have been popularized by Chapo Trap House.
Although there's suburban women who are slightly affluent.
These are women who like worship Rachel Maddow. I mean, this is Chapo's definition of the wine.
They're not
mom.
on the beer track. They're on the wine track.
They're on the wine track. And I think if I understand that demographic designation correctly, that would be one of her bases of support.
Boy, not around here.
Not the wine moms even?
The wine moms around here hate Trump, and they voted for Kamala, but I don't detect
they don't like her.
I don't detect a huge support of Kamala versus, Elizabeth Warren or, 10 other women you could name.
Well, when she did that, when she burst on the scene, as far as I could tell, with her interrogation of Brett Kavanaugh before he became a Me Too issue, and she was like, what was it? It was like, do you know anybody at such and such law firm or something? She was in a very suspicious, suggestive way trying to pin him down. He was being evasive. And then you waited for her to bring down the hammer.
Right.
And she just didn't follow it up. It was weird, but that nonetheless became a viral social media moment. They were like, yeah, she's really got him back against the wall, but she never made anything of it. But anyway, at that point, she really she was creating buzz at that point among a certain segment of the liberal spectrum. And I think she still got some of that support. The left hates her. They just say she's a cop. I mean, the young left.
You might be onto something. The left hates her. The right hates her. The wine mom constituency, the extent to which they still like her, is just not very big. So she's in deep trouble if she's trying to run for president.
There's a lot of wine moms.
By the way, J.D. Vance moving up in the Ohio polls. He's at 6% now.
Did you say 4%. You know him?
No, I've emailed him. I said hi to him at a conference once.
Ohio.
I don't know him. But anyway, he's moving up. The leaders are at 16 and 20. He's at 6. We got Vance Minham.
Excellent.
You heard it here first.
Excellent.
But anyway, I think, how did we get into Kamala?
Oh, well, just quickly, do you think she's teachable? I'm not sure. Matt Lewis was saying he didn't think she was. Bill is saying, no, it's a distinct thing that you just tell her no more flippant responses but I don't know.
It is true that if she just stopped with the frivolity and the giggles and gave a completely boring, conventional plotting answer seriously, she would do much, much, much better.
Right.
And Mike, that's what has Mike Pence done for 4 years, right?
Yeah, Bill had the great answer.
So that would be good media training. Is it enough to elect her president? I don't know. But sorry.
Well, Bill, I mean, of course, you can always come up with these answers in retrospect. But he said she should have said, look, as California, I've been to the border. As California senator, I went to the border plenty. I know what it looks like. What I've been trying to do is get a deeper understanding of where the problem originates. And that's why I went to Central America. And, that would have been fine. That would have been totally fine.
Yeah. Or you could even say, I could go to, the press is demanding a photo op or something. And I'm more serious than that.
I'm not a photo op politician.
Which is true, actually.
But, I may look like one.
Anyway, I think she's hopeless because if you're a fool, you're a fool. But
she's not hopeless because if
I agree
Biden,
that she can be. I agree that she can be coaxed into being, polling better.
look, if Biden doesn't drop out until like a year before the election, I think she may be tough to beat. She's just the heir apparent.
It is true that the Democratic field was pretty pathetic last time, and so I don't see any of them. What's wrong with Jim Clyburn? He's a more credible candidate than any of them.
Excellent idea.
How could he not? He'd be the first politician not to think about becoming president.
Well, I think Cory Booker. I've always been surprised Cory Booker doesn't do better. So maybe there's something I don't understand.
Booker's a very appealing guy, and he can think on his feet, and he's genuinely funny. When he tells a joke, you actually laugh at it. It's a good question. I don't know he went way too far to the left during the campaign. He should have campaigned as I'm the sensible centrist black guy. He would have done
a lot of people did.
That's the standard mistake in a primary is you lunge for the left activist. But go ahead. Ernest Hollings did that, of all people, as conservative a Democrat as you could possibly imagine.
Your former boss.
He thought he was going to get the endorsement of the teachers union over Walter Mondale. Completely insane. But they all fall for this. I think it's because they've all gotten these people in their home state, so they think they can be gotten. Anyway, sorry.
Well, social media may make it worse, may make them more responsive to perceived.
But her staff is obviously also way less competent than Biden's staff. I mean, incompetent. They react. He sends her to the border, and they react visibly. Oh my God, he wants us to solve this crisis. We can't solve this crisis, so we're going to pretend we're going for root causes. Or it's like that all gets out. It's all on the surface. You're supposed to hide that part.
I think Bill said her staff seems bad. I'm not sure, but I think he did.
So one of the piece of advice would be fire everybody on your staff. Anyway, that's my advice.
But, on the other hand, if you have bad staff, that may be a comment on you. I mean.
Right. But the whole point of giving advice is to make the person
advise them to fire their staff.
Even though they're still an idiot. Yeah.
Yeah. So quickly, just in terms of things, I think I said I'd talk about.
Are we going through this list now? This is your list?
Well, we've covered a number of the things that were on the list.
But we should cover everything on the list.
Correct. That's where I'm headed.
Okay.
You got to trust me in situations like this, Mickey. I'm a veteran. I'm a veteran podcaster.
I just wanted to make sure.
A lot of people think I had a shot at a Pulitzer today.
I want to make sure but you were hauntingly inconclusive.
So,
that wins the Pulitzer. Sorry.
Slate's Slow Burn podcast.
All right.
It is now clear, given that next week's episode is about the war itself, that they are not going to get into Jeffrey Epstein, Jeffrey Goldberg's, New Yorker piece about the supposed connection.
Well, why would they?
Wait a second. You're on record agreeing with me that they should. You said this in the Parrot room.
But if they have an 8-episode arc on the Iraq War, and Jeffrey Epstein's article was so important to the Iraq War that
Jeffrey Goldberg's
that they should mention it. I guess, I don't know, could be. But I think Josh Marshall and that guy at Brookings were equally important.
Are you kidding? Do I have to recount this for you?
The Brookings guy who wrote the book, The Case for War in Iraq, that was very
well. That arguably, you're right. That's a good counterpoint to what I was going to say, because that's important. But the Goldberg is super important. I mean, people forget. He writes this like a year before the invasion, if not a little more. He writes a piece in the New Yorker suggesting he talked to he was, steered by the nose to some prisoner somewhere in Iraq who says, yeah, I saw this, whatever, claims there's a connection between Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda. And does a little media circuit on it, on Terry Gross's Fresh Air, repeats it. Slate magazine hosts a little dialogue with a very friendly interlocutor on it. And then, 6 weeks before the invasion, when it's like last gasp attempts to stop the war, he writes another piece in the New Yorker, which, among other things, covers this issue. Now he's writing the controversy about, like, was he right? And there's backlash against the Saddam Hussein Al-Qaeda claim. On the other hand, there's this and that. And so he writes that, and now he's on another NPR show. It's like All Things Considered. It's as good as it gets.
But he talked about a connection between Saddam and some obscure separatist revolutionary group in some corner of Iraq. But wasn't he right about that? Wasn't that connection actually there, or was he taken in by Curveball on one of these phony sources? I haven't heard the letter.
They did do a good episode on Curveball, by the way. But I don't think he was saying him like Curveball per se, although Curveball, I think, was claiming an Al-Qaeda connection. But no, I mean, he was making it sound like an actual meaningful Al-Qaeda connection. And Saddam Hussein's connection to the group you're talking about was not that. Okay. There were these. But
there was a connection. I don't think anything he wrote has been.
I didn't even think. I'm not even sure Saddam Hussein had control over the part of Iraq where whatever group you're talking about was. But that wasn't Al Qaeda. Anyway,
I made a connection between Al Qaeda and this obscure group. Yeah, but that deficiency was clear reading the piece, sort of.
Well, that was the beauty of it was he would say. Now, when you talk about it, you say, I want to emphasize, it's possible this guy's blah, blah, blah. So he comes off as all that much more credible, but he's getting the meme out there at critical times. Anyway,
he also wrote a piece that basically said, you're crazy to think Saddam doesn't have weapons of mass destruction. Look at aflatoxin, look at all these other things. That was very powerful. That was sort of
that's a good
point. As the other one.
And I have heard an editor at the New Yorker diss that piece.
Of course, it was wrong.
Yeah. So no. Anyway, all I was going to say was they did the Judy Miller episode this week on Slow Burn.
Right.
And, she, of course, for our younger viewers, was a New York Times reporter who wrote very credibly about the weapons of mass destruction claims and was wrong. And they give her somewhat sympathetic treatment because she was a woman and was sometimes, accused of, sleeping with sources or something. I mean, she was in a relationship with Les Aspin while she was occasionally quoting Les Aspin.
She was one of the famous women around town in Washington, and people followed who she was going out with as if it was a political weather vane for which way the wind was blowing, perhaps unfairly.
What do you mean? What would it mean?
She had some boyfriends on the left, boyfriends on the right. If she was dating on the right, that sort of implied that the right wing was ascendant.
So she was always betting on the future?
She was either betting on the future or they were trying to influence her. I forget, but attention was paid to who Judy Miller went out with.
So anyway, there's a kind of a kind of a feminist defense of her in the subtext of this episode. And they also have this guy, James Risen, however you pronounce it, who was right about all this shit and was skeptical and was at the New York Times, and his stories were getting squashed sometimes. And apparently Hal Raines was just flatly pro-war, according to this episode, who was the editor of the New York Times.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's worth an episode.
Well, they mentioned that. They certainly give some evidence to that effect. Of course, he bit the dust, ironically, just right after the invasion, because he had bought into Jason Blair, who was making shit up, a reporter who was just flat out making shit up. And I think he defended him for a while. But anyway, my point is, so Risen, I think maybe rightly says, to some extent, Judy Miller was unfairly maligned because the problem was deeper at the times. There was just, because of Hal Raines and various things, it was just a pro-war atmosphere that encouraged the kind of reporting she did. She should not be singled out. So in various ways, they kind of defend her, and it's a partly feminist defense. And I was just thinking, okay, fine, defend the relatively powerless woman reporter. But if you'd like to go all the way and go after a powerful male. Jeffrey Goldberg is editor of The Atlantic. Show us you're ready. Show us that you'll do it.
Judy Miller was those stories were more important than Jeffrey Goldberg stories.
I think that's true. But
the other, Judy
but they don't even mention, they devoted a whole episode to her. They don't even mention his stuff. And you're right. They should mention, what's his name? Pollock. Ken Pollock.
But she really believed it. It's not like she was cynically producing.
Well, totally. But I think
I think Goldberg, maybe there was an element of cynicism.
I think with both of them, there was an element of ideology. I think they're both kind of neocon adjacent.
They're both what?
Neocon adjacent.
Right. But what Judy Miller, didn't she then go to Iraq and affix herself to a brigade of soldiers who was running around the country trying to find the weapons?
After the invasion.
And she really expected to find them.
No, she went further. She reported that they had found them.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, she basically did that. That was in this episode.
But they hadn't.
Her military handlers, kind of misled her.
Huh. Well, I still hold out hope that they're going to find him, but I guess the hope is fading.
Okay, let me finish off my New York Times indictment.
Okay.
David Sanger, trying hard to drive me crazy, writes the following lead. You know this China Competitiveness Act?
It used to be called the Endless Frontier Act?
Maybe.
Yes.
Anyway, here's his lead paragraph about it. It's a co-authored piece, but you can tell this has Sanger written all over it. Faced with an urgent competitive threat from China, the Senate is poised to pass the most expansive industrial policy legislation in U.S. history, blowing past partisan divisions, blah, blah, over government support for private industry to blah, blah, blah. That first clause, faced with an urgent competitive threat from China. Do you have a complaint about that?
Well, it's no worse than Tom Edsel's lead about the vote. Which
Tom Edsel writes in the opinion space, Mickey.
But the difference is Tom Edsel's opinion. But you're correct. But it's basically was in an attempt to keep black people down, the Republican Party is trying to take away voting rights.
That's the opinion space. David Sanger, supposedly a reporter. This is front page. Faced with an urgent competitive threat from China. Okay, this is he is reporting that as fact, not attributing it to anyone.
Well, faced with what they think is an urgent competitive threat.
That would have been nice. Yes. Now, I'm going to play you. Give me a second to find the exact spot. Wait, sorry. Can you juggle or something to entertain them while I find this?
I'm ready with the clapter hand to give you ironically fake applause if you come up with anything too self-righteous.
For China, both the realistic and the evils that will actually pass.
Be on guard. You're warned.
Get squeezed down a little bit.
Okay.
We're afraid we're spending too much money.
I'm just going to play you the end. So then Sanger talked about this on the daily podcast, and I'm going to, I hope this will come through and that I'm starting to get at roughly the right place. But if you listen carefully, he's basically saying threat inflation is good for the country.
Okay.
And he's basically engaging in threat inflation in this piece. So let's see. Let me see if this is the right kind of thing.
You have seen some objections that the bill, because it's one of the few spending bills that will actually pass in Congress, has become a Christmas tree for everybody's favorite project. But what we've learned here, essentially, is that the competition with China, the fear of China, both the realistic and the exaggerated fears of China, have become the one great unifying element of American politics today.
And if that is true, David, then I guess there is some hope that a democracy can plan for the long term, that this is not just the terrain of an autocracy.
That's right. Now, even after this bill passes, our research and development spending as a percentage of our GDP is still going to be well below the Chinese and some other countries. It is more of a start. But if there's one key lesson that emerges from the debate, really the non-debate over this bill, it's that America needs, again, as it always has, an adversary to be the organizing thought for things we probably needed to do anyway.
First Russia, now China.
Russia in the Cold War, China in the new Cold War.
That's how America gets its act together.
That's how America has a shot at getting its act together.
More dramatic music and fades out. That's the resonant ending. And if you listen to what he's saying that the only chance America has of getting its act together is being faced by an adversary, the perception of threat, as he says, real and exaggerated. He's saying is a good thing.
The guy who said the inflated threat was just as good was not Sanger, it was the host.
That's Michael Barbaro.
He was talking in the Michael Barbaro talk.
Yeah, that was at 1.3 speed.
Sanger
you don't get the full effect.
Sanger did not say. Sanger just said they needed a threat. He didn't say they needed an inflated threat.
Now, I'll read you the happily. This is in our newsletter that we just published this week. So I'll read you the key thing. It may have gone by fast, but Sanger says, what we've learned here essentially is that competition with China, the fear of China, both the realistic and the exaggerated fears of China have become one great unifying element of American politics today. Then Barbaro says, and kind of affirms that and says, so there is some hope that democracy can plan for the long term. He says, that's right. Sanger says, and then they go on and he says, and Barbaro says, that's how America gets its act together. And Sanger says, that's how America has a shot at getting its act together. It's a through line from fear of China, both realistic and exaggerated, to this is how.
He doesn't really say that exaggerated fear of China works. He could say we need a fear of China. They're two separate things. He says both kinds of fear are unifying, and he said we need a fear of China. He did not actually say
read the non-zero newsletter.
We need fake fear of China to bring us together and mobilize us.
Read the non-zero newsletter, and if you are not persuaded, then I will give you a free subscription to the non-zero newsletter.
Meanwhile, did you see the Chinese rover on Mars? It's terrifying. It's incredibly much cooler than ours.
No, it's not. Is it?
It's so
What
cool.
does it have?
It's got like a platform, and the thing rolls off the platform, and it's like evil looking, and it looks like cicadas having sex. It's fantastic.
That reminds me.
Anyway, it's as good as ours, and so I would say we're in an urgent competition.
That reminds me. I think the next phase in car design, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Again, this comes right off of my excellent Huawei camera. I think the next phase in car design is to have a grill that's modeled after this, Mickey. Check it out. Have a grill that looks like that.
Is that?
That's a
frontal of a cicada?
That's a full frontal of a cicada.
That's
killer
cool.
shit. That's killer shit.
That is awfully cool.
Elon, I hope you're a listener.
Because they have had cars that look like insects, but
not
cars
like this one.
Not cars that have huge
red headlights.
Not huge red bug eyes.
I
was going to reflexively criticize anything you say, but I actually thought that was a good point.
Thank you.
But there was a car called a Scarab, but it didn't look like a Scarab.
So I think, I don't know. It's getting a little late. I was going to ask you what I should write about in the newsletter this week. If you have any, I've done UFOs. And you were going to talk about a weird Georgia ballot thing.
Oh, yeah.
Make it snappy, because we got some comments to go through, too.
Okay, well, there's a passel of election news. They're just sort of beating Trump from pillar to post on his continuing claims about the election. But he did get this. There is this judge in Georgia who doesn't seem to be a right-wing crazy person, who did order them to examine a pile of ballots that looked like two or three witnesses, like they'd been Xeroxed. In other words, when there's to feed the ballot into the machine, it has to be a certain size. So when they get a spoiled ballot or a ballot they want to like duplicate a real ballot that won't go through the machine, they make up a new ballot to sort of serve as a substitute for it. And they on on a regular sized piece of paper and they feed that in. Nothing weird or nefarious about that they do that all the time. But these were people who were poll workers who said there were a bunch of ballots all for Biden and they all looked like they'd been Xeroxed, which is different. They all look like they've been duplicated. So somebody just said, print me up 1,000 Biden ballots, and somebody printed up 1,000 Biden ballots. That's was their testimony. And the judge said, well, let's open up this pile of 150,000 or so ballots and see if these ballots exist. Okay. And the New York Times debunking of this was, I'm afraid to say, not convincing. There's I guess there's no way you can debunk this without seeing the ballots, which is the judge's point. But the point is there is some bit of legitimate controversy that the Times has, and nobody.
Is it too late to see the ballots? Is it possible to see the ballots?
Oh no! Well, the ballots exist, and they are going to see the ballots. They're allegedly under 24-hour guard, and supposedly the guard went off duty suspiciously for a couple of hours. But the ballots do exist, and the judge was careful in terms of not letting the kooks who were challenging this get their hands on the ballots. So it's just going to be examined. But the ballots exist, and they're going to be examined. So I assume that they will turn out to not be Xerox carbon copies, and everything will be okay. All I'm saying is it hasn't been debunked yet. So that's troubling that it hasn't been debunked yet. It's not going to change the election, but it hasn't been debunked yet. And the Times sort of pretended it was debunked, but they were really pretending. I mean, there's no debunking.
Well, if it's what you say, I hate it.
Okay. And I read about I generally think that all this stuff about the evil voting rights laws is a bunch of hysteria designed to gin up opposition to the filibuster, designed to pass all sorts of other things once the filibuster is gone. But there were a couple of things in the Texas law that were annoying. One is they shifted the Georgia law. I didn't find really anything that was horribly annoying. They were, as Jonathan Chase says, they're imposing all these criminal penalties on poll workers if they do the wrong thing. So who are they going to get to be poll workers? Isn't that excessive? Felony charges if you send out, unsolicited direct, absentee ballots. I mean, it's wildly excessive. And the second thing is they changed the standard of evidence for overturning an election to preponderance of evidence, which seems way too weak. It had been, you have to show with clear and convincing evidence. You don't want judges willy-nilly, throwing out elections just because they decide the preponderance of evidence is one way or the other. So there was, I think it reflects well on me that I found things to object to.
So many things reflect well on you that I'm surprised you're narrowing it down to this.
I know, but they're hard to find in the election. And if you were paranoid, you would object to the election law, them giving power of state officials to override local election boards in Georgia. But
you're not paranoid. That's the great thing about you.
Reporters who are on the ground tended to say, no, this is really nothing to worry about. You're being paranoid. But since I support all forms of paranoia, I should support that too. Okay.
Comments? Ready to hear from the commenters, Mickey?
I am.
Kyle Winston says regarding the UFOs, BBC journalist Adam Curtis. Now, he says he did this documentary, Hypernormalization. I'm surprised to hear that he's a BBC journalist because I thought I had heard of that as this kind of indie lefty thing, Hypernormalization. Anyway, he says that Curtis does a good job of portraying the increase of sightings in the 80s as part of the U.S. government's ability to convince us of such otherworldly things, meanwhile developing super sophisticated military weapons in plain sight. So what, this was some kind of diversion or something? Anyway, people want to go down a rabbit hole. I guess you should watch Hypernormalization. In fact, Kyle Winston, I think, is suggesting that we might, it would make a good movie club material. Should we do, I was also thinking about The Day the Earth Stood Still in preparation for the UFO report. We could watch The Day the Earth Stood Still. No?
Is that the one where humanity allies against the
aliens read us? The aliens read us the Wright Act, and it has Patricia Neal. It would be our second Patricia Neal movie.
Do they read from non-zero?
They read from non-zero, and
the aliens come down and they say this book really should have won the Pulitzer Prize.
Correct. And the movie was done in the 50s, so clearly time travel is
precious,
real.
Very precious.
So, anyway, we could also do network. Should we finish the trilogy of supposedly prescient movies?
I think we should finish the trilogy of supposedly prescient movies. Yes.
I think there'll still be time. If we do that this week, there'll still be time for Day the Earth Stood Still.
But we have, aren't there better science fiction movies like the one where the Japanese tunnel under the Pacific?
That's the Chinese.
The Chinese?
Yeah, Battle Beneath the Earth.
Yeah, that sounds great. Or Them. Them is good. Them is where giant ants crawl out of the LA River or something.
I haven't seen that. That sounds terrific.
And how do they have sex? America wants to know.
I'm game. I'm up. But I do think, the Day the Earth Stood Still is a classic. And if we're going to be ready for the UFO report. Anyway,
is that the one that Reagan liked? Reagan liked one
that sounds like Reagan. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That sounds like late Reagan when he's rushing over to Russia to eliminate all nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Right. With 3 days left in his administration or something. So a veritable symposium on the Philadelphia sound, Mickey. Jeremy Smith says that what makes it distinctive is compared to Berry Gordy or the Muscle Shoals rhythm section, who built more muscular styles, which were in conversation with funk and rock and roll. Gamble and Huff, those are the guys who started Philadelphia International Records, were more into lush, string-laden arrangements, though the highs were tremendous. For instance, if you don't know me by now, that's me singing it. He didn't sing it. Which is simply incredible, he says, and he's right. It's a beautiful song when properly sung. The lows paved the way for a lot of early 80s easy listening R&B dross like Lionel Richie. Lionel Richie had his moments, don't you think?
I like Lionel Richie better than If You Know Me by Now.
No, that's a pretty song.
Dancing on the Ceiling, man. You know what country worships Lionel Richie? Where he's like a god?
Portugal?
Iraq.
Really?
Big in Iraq. Yeah.
Huh. I wouldn't have guessed that. So, wait. So just a reply to Jeremy would be like, but isn't Expressway to Your Heart, which was, I don't know if it was done by Philadelphia International Records. In fact, written by Gamble or Huff. Isn't it kind of in conversation with funk a little or something? Wouldn't you say? Maybe?
Expressway to Your Heart is a Philadelphia song?
Yeah, it was written by one of these guys.
Oh,
now,
anyway,
I don't know that I'm kind of suggesting it's not classic Philadelphia sound.
It isn't. It's different. That comment completely captured why I don't like the Philadelphia sound, and made me realize how great Motown was that they didn't have any of that bullshit.
Okay, Marshall Auerbach says the Philly sound was somewhat more jazzy, a lot more horns, some strings, and in many respects prefigured disco. I'm not sure about that, although much better, he says. And let's not forget the late, great Teddy Pendergast. I did mention him last time. I think I mispronounced his name. Or Curtis Mayfield. Was Curtis Mayfield part of the Philly sound?
Beats me.
Superfly. Harry McCracken. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go, keep going.
Well, final comment on Philly sound comes from Harry McCracken. Motown was the sound of young America. Kids making music for kids about kids stuff. Gamble and Huff's Philadelphia sound was about adult concerns, infidelity, money, social problems. It often has a melancholy tinge to it. Along with the performers you mentioned, Gamble and Huff produced A Brand New Me, Dusty Springfield's second best album. Who knew? They produced Dusty Springfield.
That happens all the time. People cross genres to produce other people's albums.
Well, come on. Still, did you know that?
I did not know that.
Okay. So what were you going to say about Philly sound? Anything?
No,
any last thoughts?
I claim once driving across the country, I heard a song, which I believe was anyway, it was a rap song, but it was like a chant around a campfire. It was like a tribal chant. It was fantastic. And it's It's done by that rapper out of Philadelphia who did the one about it must be the Benjamins, it must be the money. That he's a St. Louis rapper. He was huge, and he did this one that was like, it sounded like a chant. And then there was, I claim I heard a couple of songs where there was like this chanting around the campfire, and then there was an absurd string break. And then there was more chanting, and I was convinced that this was the future of soul music, and boy was I wrong. But
you wrong.
But this one song is really good, and it would be the future of soul music if they just tried it.
Now here's a trivia question from me. The theme song for the TV show Soul Train, which was written by these guys, was called what? What was the title of the theme song for Soul Train? Dun, 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 dun.
Soul Train.
Dun. Wrong.
It was worth a shot.
It was either called TSOP or what that stands for, which is the Sound of Philadelphia. And it's a song. Do you know the song?
No.
You would recognize. It's funny. I couldn't have told you what it was, but you recognize it, and I didn't realize that was the theme to Soul Train. It was only in later Soul Train. Soul Train existed before this, but.
Well, I'm afraid my last comment made me sound like a pathetic, out of touch white guy who hears a couple of songs on the radio.
No one would ever think that about you.
It was semi-incoherent, but I will come up with the name of the song and maybe even play it next week, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But you'll play it on the guitar for us? You'll do your version? I would just have it like.
Well, you can't do that, or YouTube will take the video down.
Oh, you're right. I can't do that.
It's amazing. Interestingly, Zoom just popped up after I played that part from the podcast. It popped up this message that says, set up professional audio in audio settings. That's some pretty good AI.
Huh. I wanted to bring up hydroxychloroquine, which is making a comeback.
Oh, yeah, you said you would.
Peter Navarro claims to have had a couple of studies that show that there's some studies that show it works in really severe cases, and there are other studies that show it really works in early cases. So, I don't know who is right, but I'm just saying it hasn't gone away. But you get banned from YouTube if you advocate it. So we get banned from YouTube because of this.
Do you think it undermines Peter Navarro's credibility? He's a fucking nut who's always saying shit that's not true.
But as we may find out in Georgia, even if you're a nut, you may be
even a nut is right twice a day.
Yeah. So
let's see what else.
And if we're banned from YouTube, you have me to blame.
What other news? Karen told us how to pronounce her last name. The Chuchi part is Chuchi. Rhymes with Gucci. Chuchi's wiki. Brian Mowry. This is too long. What was I? I think Trump is very smart. Creative intellectual impulse. I don't know. I'm losing my train of thought. We've been doing this too long. Here's another thing he says, though. Oh, in a different message, Brian Mowry says, is this UNZ kook really so smart? Having a love for conspiracy theories, I went to read his COVID origin argument. It's terrible. Now, Mickey, as you know, he emailed me. I forwarded the email to you. Did you read? I still haven't read his thing.
I haven't either. I was moving on.
Emailed me. My claim to fame.
I'm not surprised.
There's some discussion about idiocracy and eugenics. Melinda Barnes makes, I think, a good point that it did have its moments, and she cites, I agree. The line was funny where the guy says, every time he says, lead, follower, get out of the way. I get out of the way. Like, not understanding that, no, he means either lead or follow. In context, it's a good example of one of these things that's making fun of how dumb a person is. There's a lot of like Dumb and Dumber vibe in this movie. It's like a making fun of dumb people movie. And sometimes it does it well.
I figured out the part of the movie your wife laughed at.
What?
It was the "ow my balls" part.
No, she didn't.
They
laughed at that, and both of my daughters will look at me like, "Is it too late
There's a part
for
of the movie
divorce here?"
A guy keeps getting kicked in the balls, and the show is called "Ow My Balls."
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the number one rated show in the future. Bob, this slog through the reader mail is less than compelling.
Are you kidding?
May I give you a note from the studio executives?
This was good shit. Is that the note?
The note is figure out which emails you want to talk about and then talk about
that. That was all carefully chosen. Okay, fine. We'll stop there. And people who said brilliant shit that's not getting mentioned.
Well, if you have brilliant shit, let's have it.
And they know who loves them. And they know who loves them. And by the way, you know what's going to happen here, Mickey? You know what you just triggered? A wave of people who were at the $8 tier here, getting my newsletter, going to go subscribe directly to the Substack newsletter for $6, and all the money's going to go to me, and that's what's going to happen. Follow the numbers. We'll see. Watch.
Because I've offended.
Nice going, because you don't care about them.
I've offended the Bobberati.
Yes.
I thought I've offended Bob, but I guess that offends the Bobberati.
You can't offend Bob. Bob's too old to get offended.
Anyway, all I'm saying is
fine. I'm closing the document.
No, if there's a good one,
carefully
go to it.
Selected. No. I mean, just because I hired a team of fucking consultants to go through the comments and find the most compelling ones, and that's what I do with my half of the money. By the way,
you hired Frank Luntz.
Frank was in on this. He focus grouped these. They worked well in the focus group. But fine.
Okay, well,
fine. No. Fine. It's fine. Okay. It has been a while. We have been doing this a while. It's an hour and 42 minutes.
I wouldn't have taken you for a Jewish mother.
Mickey has a date tonight. And we have a mystery guest next week. We hope, unless this person cancels. Oh, yeah. The sound of one hand clapping. Thank you for that, Mickey.
Sure.
And we will see everyone next week, as I recall. Is that the plan?
Correct. See you next week.
Now that's compelling. Thanks for that, Mickey.